Hello, everybody. Savant here. Today I'll be having a discussion on immigration with a guest who goes by the title The Fly 2.0. I will be defending strict border restrictions, while Fly will be defending open borders. But first, if you have a strong opinion you'd like to defend, head over to DebateCraft.com and start a debate today. That's DebateCraft.com. We have rated debates, informal debates, and an official leaderboard so you can measure your skills against other strong debaters. Now, without further ado, let the debate begin. Fly, you have the floor.
I'm against all borders because I believe that they're oppressive. I think they ruin uh, the economy. I think actively every single day that we don't give illegal immigrants documents, our economy doesn't grow. I think it lowers wages the more we don't have borders. Mm. I mean, the more we have borders, um, and I think it's just purely immoral and unethical. I think that would be.
Okay, I guess I can respond to that case. So, first of all, when you say oppressive, I don't think it's oppression. I think it's protective of the citizens of the country. And we can talk about, how like a utopian idea for society, but I think that gets kind of distracted from the reality of the situation, which is we do right now have a lot of institutions. The economy depends on predictability, on the current institutions. People have jobs they don't want to lose. It's not very easy to tell everyone just sort of reorganize your labor. People have invested a lot of time into education, into specific jobs, with the understanding that the government is going to support them. And so opening up the floodgates is jeopardizing the economy in that way. So, first of all, there's the economics, which I've sort of been building up to. If you have a lot of low skilled laborers coming across the border, first of all, you're going to have people flooding in and taking social benefits, which there is only so much to go around. So it's going to instantly stretch thin a lot of the safety net, education. You're going to have a lot more people registering for the schools, and a lot of these places have a fixed budget. Will these people who are coming in pay taxes? Maybe eventually, but it's not going to be a smooth transition. It's going to be a lot of people coming in for benefits instantly. You're going to have people flooding into the labor market, a lot of low skilled laborers competing for the same position, and it's going to cause wages to go down. When you have an increased supply, price goes down, and you're going to have a much bigger supply of labor, particularly low skilled labor. Another big concern is national security. If you have a lot of people coming over, uh, there's billions of people on the planet. A lot of people, especially if you have a first world country, let's say the United States or a country in Europe, and you have a lot of people coming in, a lot of people would come to a first world country if given the opportunity. And it's you can't vet all of them. It's just impossible. There have been countries, Europe allowed a lot of refugees in, and you saw terrorist attacks was the most extreme example. But you're going to have crime. You're going to have people, especially people coming from other countries where maybe the safety processes aren't as strict. Maybe these are countries where there's a lot more violence because the police haven't been able to prosecute drug dealers or terrorist groups as much. And when you're letting a lot of people in, there are groups that are going to take advantage of that. There's going to be a big market for criminal activity. Since you can't vet everyone, there are going to be criminal groups that slip through the cracks. So I think there's a national security issue, and there's an issue with sort of taking a sledgehammer to the economy or trying to totally restructure the economy in such a short period of time is going to cause a lot of issues.
I just don't see why we can't have like a little transition. I mean,
Uh,
I'm not saying we should just do it immediately, right? I mean, you're right. We should be a little pragmatic about it. But I mean, I think we should lead to the abolition of borders. You know what I mean?
Why I think the
And
issue with
also,
okay,
I mean,
I'll let you make a case because I talked for a while. Go ahead.
so
Okay.
um, I think, I mean, a lot of crime happens because of like wealth inequality in other countries, right? I think we live in a world where like the U.S., right, and other European powers, right? They're the ones that mess around in other countries, right? So I I think terrorism would drastically drop if we have no borders and we stop all like intervention. You know what I mean? Like I think the terrorism would drastically slow down, and I think crime would drastically lower. Because I do believe that with a more open borders like policy, right? I think the economy would grow significantly. I think crime would drop just from good economics. You know what I mean? So I just don't believe that crime would drastically spike up. You see what I'm saying?
Well, I think the issue is that you're sort of, I think, I don't want to say hand waving away a lot of these issues where, maybe if we do good economics, it'll just solve the problem. But we live in a society with scarce resources. And a lot of countries have tried having totally open borders. There were countries in Europe that accepted a lot of refugees, and it put a big strain on the social safety net. When you're saying, well, we should do a slow transition, this isn't an issue of necessarily just poor management. It's a case of doing this as a slow transition is impossible if you want to say get to a place of no borders, because the number of people who are going to come in, it's not contained. It's a near limitless amount of people who are going to be coming in and trying to access the social safety net. So at whatever point you open the floodgates, even if it's after 10 years, if it's after 20 years, you're going to have a lot of low skilled laborers competing for jobs. You can't keep wages high with such a large supply of people coming in. You just can't, because then you have no bargaining power. And if you raise the wages a certain amount, then you're just going to have a shortage of jobs. The issue of intervening in other countries, um, this it's what this is really revealing is a lot of the dangers of, I think, globalization, and countries where uh some country like Western countries will go and impose Western culture on other countries, and because there's a lot of misunderstandings, a lot of incompatible cultural practices, imperialism does have these negative effects. But you're going to have a lot of similar effects with immigration, where the conflicts that have been caused between these countries, in addition to resentment, a lot of you have these terrorist groups that have arisen in other countries, and regardless of why that has been caused, you're just going to make it worse by allowing a near infinite number of people to come into a first world country, particularly a country with social safety nets. And these countries are trying to provide a high standard of living for their people, but it's not sustainable if you have an ever growing number of people. Uh, the government only has so much in its budget.
Um, I just I think I think you're wrong about the reason that so many countries turned bad is because of Western culture being opposed on that. I think it was sanctions, embargoes, and war that really took a number on them. Not exactly. Just like, why are you saying that it was the culture that ruined a bunch of countries?
Well, I think the issue. So one example is like the Iraq War and the U.S. going into the Middle East and trying to impose, and Afghanistan, and trying to impose the sort of Western democracy on these countries when they were used to governments that were structured very differently from Western democracies. And the sort of there this cultural clash between the countries meant that it just wasn't sustainable. The Taliban took back power. Um, and the issue with this is now you
Hmm.
have people who clearly Western democracies didn't work in these other countries, and now you're taking these immigrants and bringing them into Western democracies, and there's a big cultural clash. You're going to have sort of religious conflicts between groups, just like when you have different groups in the Middle East that are fighting each other. You're sort of bringing that conflict over to these other countries, and of course, in the Middle East, you want to sort of create stability and get these cultures to accept each other. But the issue is that countries that are currently stable, Western democracies, they've had their years of religious clash and finally reached an equilibrium and truces between these groups. When you have uncontrolled immigration into these countries, suddenly there's going to be
new majority and minority groups of religious belief. There's going to be new conflicts between because you've sort of shifted uh, what the sides are going to be in cultural conflict. You're bringing groups together, religious groups that have had years of conflict in their areas and have finally sort of reached stability with the groups they were fighting with, and there's going to be new conflicts of that type, and from areas with very different governments, very different traditions, and this has caused in Europe, you've had a lot of terrorist attacks because they let in immigrants. And when you let in everyone, you're also letting in criminal groups. And that's not to say that there aren't criminal groups originating in these first world countries, but they're criminal groups that the countries have had a lot of time to deal with and have, figured out how they operate. And suddenly you're bringing in you're sort of increasing the complexity by a very large factor, which is why it's going to be hard to deal with
Mhm.
uncontrolled immigration.
Yeah, I think first you would have to prove that that regularly, right? And at least over 51% of people don't assimilate good when they immigrate to a country, right?
Well, I don't think it's the matter
And
of
also the Western
well, go ahead.
sorry, where you go?
Oh no, go ahead, make all your
Cool.
points, and then
Also
I'll try to
the way
respond.
you said that like that, and also the way you said that like the that Iraq and Afghanistan has a lot of criminal organizations because we try to impose a democracy. I think it's absolutely just wrong. I think they went in there just for pure resources and just put a puppet government, right?
Well, I
Like, I
think
think I think it's just not equivalent. That I mean, like for example, like I mean, I know you didn't say Iran, right? But Iran, they like they acquired a socialist leader, right, that the people really liked, and then the U.S. killed him. Would you consider that imposing Western culture?
well, yeah, I think the standards that the West uses to judge a totalitarian leader or I don't know a fair government, those are the standards being imposed. That it's the United States decided that the leader wasn't doing a good job, but in what one culture considers to be a good leader isn't what another culture
Mhm.
considers to be a good leader, and that's the kind of conflict that you're going to have when you have mass migration.
But I think the difference that migration isn't like imposed upon you, right? It's not like when the U.S. killed the Iranian leader, right? And just said like, "Oh, this isn't good enough for us." It's someone saying, "Oh, that country over there is good enough for me," and then they go over there. See what I'm saying?
But the
I just
issue,
don't think it's equivalent of when an immigrant moves somewhere, then when the U.S. goes and starts conflict in another country.
well, I think it is imposed through, I guess, tyranny of the majority because when the majority I guess what the majority of people want when they're voting for an elected leader, that's going to be imposed on the minority, on the people who support the other leader. So, where if you have, I don't know, a leader, let's say that the United States assassinated because people in the U.S. thought, oh, this was such a terrible dictatorial leader, but the people in that country loved the leader. And then you have people from that country coming in. And this could be any country. I mean, we could go into specifics, but I think this is going to be on a large scale. This is how it's going to work, no matter where you have immigrants coming in. Maybe you have, I don't know, Putin's approval rating is very high among, or I believe it's higher than some Western leaders by a significant amount. But if you have a lot of people who support Putin coming in to, I don't know, a Western country, and now you're going to have people who want to elect the Putin for this country. And that's going to be a significant cultural clash because what the people currently in the country value and what the people who are coming into the country value can be very different things. And I think it's not
Yeah.
necessarily a
Mhm.
state imposing its
I
will,
mean,
it's the populace changing what the state does.
I mean, to me, it just kind of sounds like you're just against democracy now. 'Cause like, if you're against rule of majority, then I don't know why when it comes to immigrants it's bad, but whenever people vote for Kamala, right, and let's say she won, right, like you'd be cool with that. I just don't see a difference if
Well, it's I'm not
you see
against.
what I'm saying. Like
I think
if you agree that
well, I think the democracy is there are certainly flaws. Democracies can come up with imperfect systems. I don't think it's feasible. I don't think there are feasible alternatives. I think you need democracy, but then it raises the question of what's fair. I mean, we support rule of the majority. Sure, we can say that's sustainable, but then what's the right majority to be voting? Should it be the majority of the people who are here right now, the majority of the people that would want to come in? And if you just say the majority of the people who want to come in, well, what happens when you have significant conflicts and a leader gets elected who's going to oppress one of the groups at the expense of another group? I mean, if you have the voting population being shifted very significantly, yes, it's the rule of the new majority, but if that's leading to undesirable outcomes, if it's leading to a significant shift in cultural values, then I don't know that that's a good thing. I think the tyranny of the majority and groups taking power in a democracy, uh, it can be dangerous, and that it has to be done carefully. I think that sort of opening the floodgates, and who knows what the majority is going to want tomorrow, that's not very sustainable. The democracies have to survive by being predictable, by being the thing that's desirable in the first world country. A lot of the structural things you want to keep those intact. And if you bring in group, who's to say that it's going to be a first world country in 20 or 30 years if the kind of leaders that people are electing are the kind of leaders that are leading that have taken totalitarian power in other countries.
I mean, I just don't understand. I mean, you think like generally that we could just go like a Putin in America here, or a
Well, that's
or literally any dictator? You think we could invite a Castro just from voting?
I think
I mean,
that's
I
a
think the
broad
checks and balances, right, or
that's
would
a
prevent
broad
something like that happening.
Well, I think that's a very broad example. I don't think the largest, I don't think we have mass migration from Russia, but that's, let's say we have a lot of people, let's say you have a dictator in the Middle East who took power, but was still, I don't know, elected by a large percentage of the population. I mean, you look at I don't know, leaders in Palestine and the leaders in Israel who want very different things from each other. They've been at war since, forever. And that's just the range in a very small area of competing cultural values. You have leaders in Palestine who want to wipe out a ton of Israelis. You have leaders in Israel who want to wipe out a ton of Palestinians. And suddenly, let's say a country takes in a ton of immigrants from the Middle East. What happens when suddenly the majority now wants to elect a leader who would, you know, uh, similar to the leaders of Palestine or similar to the leaders of Israel, and suddenly they're going to start targeting these new minority groups. The fact that the
Hmm.
majority group is shifting so quickly, it's not something you can predict. If you can say sort of we can take polls in the United States or in European countries, and we can sort of predict this party is going to grow a little bit, this party is going to shrink a little bit. If you have no idea tomorrow whether the majority is going to want, capitalism, communism, authoritarianism, anarchism, because, the majority tomorrow could want anything, depending on where the immigrants are coming in from. If you're saying people can literally come in from wherever, that I don't see how that's a sustainable government. I think you're sacrificing a lot of certainty for a lot of questions. And then suddenly this idea that, oh, we're going to allow freedom by allowing in immigrants, how do you know that you're going to allow any sort of freedom tomorrow? You could end up with a government that's much more oppressive than the government that the country currently has.
Hmm. I just Man, it just seems like to me that your problem's mostly just with democracy in general. Because I mean, okay, if there was a bunch of legal immigration right now, like right now, right, with borders, right,
Hmm.
you have to go through the processes, right, and somehow the majority of a bunch of Muslim people, right, like there's just a huge Palestinian boom of population, right,
Hmm.
and they offer to have somehow right legally immigrate, or would you just be cool with them, but for a Palestinian leader or whatever they want that's
One
pro-Palestine,
Once the immigrants are
just
in the
because they legally immigrated?
once the immigrants are in the country, I would support democracy. My issue is not with democracy. I think that once you start imposing saying these people can't vote or we can't follow the will of the majority, that creates problems. That creates, I think, the worst problems here that I totally want to avoid. The issue is that when you have the will of the majority, I think you want to have as many safeguards as possible to ensure that that the will of the majority does not sort of go haywire. And the way I would do it, one way is education. For example, I would say if everyone was uneducated and wanted irresponsible leaders, I would still support the will of the majority because I think that the alternatives to democracy are all bad. All right, you have to stick with democracy. But if the population is uneducated and therefore votes for irresponsible leaders, if the public is unaware of the platforms of the leaders, I think I want to resolve that. I want the majority to be as educated and creating a sustainable state and safety. So that just because I support rule of the majority does not mean that I am not conscious of factors that are influencing the majority. And sort of if there's different types of representative democracy, you can have the country is divided into sections, and each section has a different representative. You can have the it's a proportional democracy, and for the same reason that I would not want suddenly allowing a bunch of new members of the majority to come in, I would not want to suddenly change how the democracy is structured because maybe you end up at democracy either way, but I think sustainability is important. If people can't foresee what major changes are going to be made by the electorate, then it can be very difficult for people to sort of plan their lives around that or to take precautions to avoid maybe a new charismatic leader coming in who's going to be very bad for the country, which is always a risk in any democracy. But I think stability and sustainability are pretty important to avoid the worst possible outcomes.
Boy, what's up, fellas? What are
Oh,
we up to?
we're just discussing immigration for DebateCraft YouTube channel.
Based.
Yeah.
Based.
Mike, do you have
Um,
any? What's your take on immigration?
I think that considering the economic climate, we have plenty of immigrants here. I think if you've been staying here for longer than 40 years and you've been paying into SSN and also paying your sales tax, not committed a crime, then you should be processed through legal citizenship. However, I think we have plenty of immigrants, and the current rate of employment is actually higher than the jobs available. So there's no incentive for us to take more people in until we can take care of our own problems.
I see. Similar to what I've been arguing today. Fly, I think we sort of double teamed here. So, uh, Fly, why don't I'll give you a chance to give sort of your closing statement, and then we can wrap up the immigration discussion.
Sure. Yeah. I think ideally in a world in which everybody can be trusted and no one is acting on malicious intent, then sure, let's let everybody in. But at the end of the day, what defines us as a nation is that we have closed borders, and every other country around us also has a pretty strict border policy with deportation. So I don't see why white countries or European countries are the only to be held to the standard of humanitarianism.
All right, Fly, you can have the last word.
oh no, I personally believe all countries should be borderless. Yeah. But yeah, I would just say that from what I've like seen, right, immigrants do assimilate properly, right? At least a huge majority of them. They increase wages on the long term, not in the short term, but eventually they do. I think most of them pay, at least a huge majority also pay their taxes. Mm. And especially legal immigrants have the lowest crime rates possible, or at least lowest crime rates out of like any group, at least from natural born citizens and naturalized citizens. They have the lowest crime rate. I mean,
Thank you.
I think even if we have no borders, I think definitely having a way more open border would definitely be like way better for everyone.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a comment below saying who you think won and what topics you'd like to see discussed next. Also, head over to DebateCraft.com, where you can start your own debate and defend your strong opinions. That's DebateCraft.com. You can also click the Discord invite in the description below to join our community. We have rated debates, informal debates, and an official leaderboard, so you can test your skills against other strong debaters. As always, thanks for watching.